The sun was setting over the canyon, painting the rugged cliffs in hues of orange and crimson. A silence so profound it could be felt hung heavy in the air, broken only by the distant cry of a hawk wheeling high above. Somewhere near the edge of that vast chasm, a little boy had disappeared. His absence left behind an ache in the hearts of those who loved him, and a mystery that would unravel in ways no one could have ever foreseen. It was a quiet evening at the Johnson family ranch, nestled deep within the arid expanse of the western frontier. The ranch house stood sturdy against the elements, its wooden beams weathered by time and wind. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney, mingling with the scent of pine carried on the breeze. Inside, Mary Johnson sat by the fireplace, her hands trembling as she clutched a faded quilt to her chest. Her husband, John, paced back and forth, his boots scuffing the dirt floor. Their son, Tommy, had wandered off earlier that day, drawn perhaps by the allure of adventure or simply by childish curiosity. But now, as darkness began to fall, he was nowhere to be found. "Mary," John said, his voice gruff but laced with concern, "we need to find him before night sets in fully." He grabbed his rifle from its resting place by the door and slung a lantern over his shoulder. Outside, the world seemed to grow colder with each passing moment. The stars were beginning to peek through the twilight sky, their light faint yet piercing against the encroaching shadows. Mary followed close behind, her lantern casting a weak glow around them. She called out into the stillness, her voice quivering like the leaves of the cottonwood trees nearby. "Tommy, Tommy." There was no answer, only the whisper of the wind brushing against the sagebrush. They searched for what felt like hours, combing the fields surrounding the ranch, and venturing closer to the canyon's edge. It loomed ahead of them, a jagged scar carved into the earth, its depth shrouded in shadow. The canyon was known to be treacherous, its rocky terrain hiding countless dangers: snakes, quicksand, even the occasional bandit seeking refuge among its crags. Yet there was something else about this place, something almost supernatural, as if it whispered secrets only it understood. Little did they know, Tommy wasn't alone. Hours earlier, Tommy had been playing near the creek that ran along the base of the canyon. Water trickled gently over smooth stones, reflecting the golden rays of the afternoon sun. Tommy knelt beside it, fascinated by the tiny fish darting just beneath the surface. His laughter echoed softly across the clearing, a sound that brought warmth to anyone who might have heard it. But then, without warning, a rustling in the bushes startled him. Turning quickly, he saw a pair of glowing eyes peering at him from the underbrush. At first, fear gripped him tightly, but curiosity soon took hold. Slowly, cautiously, he approached the source of the noise. What emerged from the shadows was not a monster, as he half expected, but a young coyote pup. Its fur was mottled brown and gray, its ears perked up with interest. Tommy crouched down, extending a hand toward the creature. To his amazement, the pup allowed him to pet it, wagging its tail tentatively. But then another sound came, not from the bushes, but from deeper within the canyon. A low howl reverberated through the valley, sending shivers down Tommy's spine. Before he could react, the pup turned and bolted, disappearing into the wilderness. Instinctively, Tommy chased after it, calling out its name despite knowing it wouldn't respond. The chase led him farther and farther away from the safety of the ranch, until finally he found himself standing at the very brink of the canyon. The view was breathtaking, though terrifying in its grandeur. Below him stretched miles of unforgiving rock and twisting paths, some leading dead ends, others disappearing into darkness. Tommy hesitated, unsure whether to turn back or continue forward. And then once more the howl sounded, louder this time, closer. From somewhere below, a pack of coyotes emerged, their silhouettes stark against the fading sunlight. For a brief moment, Tommy froze, certain that these wild animals would see him as prey. Instead, they circled him curiously, sniffing the air around him. One of them, larger than the rest, stepped forward and nudged him gently with its nose. Tommy realized, unbelievably, that they meant him no harm. In fact, it seemed as though they were guiding him. Back at the ranch, John and Mary continued their desperate search. By now, the moon had risen high in the sky, bathing the landscape in silver light. They weren't alone, Neighbors and friends had joined the hunt, their lanterns dotting the horizon like fireflies. Among them was Old Man Peterson, a former trapper whose knowledge of the land rivaled that of any mapmaker. He rode alongside John, his face etched with worry lines deeper than usual. "I've seen things out here," Peterson muttered, his voice barely audible over the crunch of gravel beneath their horses' hooves. "Things that don't make sense unless you believe in signs." "What kind of signs?" John asked sharply, refusing to let hopelessness take root. Peterson pointed toward the canyon. "Sometimes, when someone gets lost down there, they come back changed. Or they don't come back at all." John glanced at the darkened gorge, feeling a chill run down his spine. "We'll bring him back," he declared firmly, "no matter what." As dawn broke over the horizon, the search party reached the canyon's rim. The sight below was daunting, but also strangely beautiful. Sunlight filtered through the mist clinging to the rocks, creating an ethereal glow. Just as John prepared to descend, a commotion erupted below. At first, it was indistinguishable, a blur of movement against the rocks, but then shapes became clearer. Coyotes, dozens of them, moving purposefully up the canyon wall. Among them walked Tommy. Relief washed over John and Mary like a tidal wave. They shouted his name, tears streaming down their faces as they watched him emerge unscathed. But as they embraced him, questions lingered in their minds. How had he survived? Why had the coyotes brought him home? Tommy explained what little he could remember. The pup, the pack, the journey through the canyon. He spoke of moments where the coyotes had protected him from danger, steering him clear of pitfalls and predators. It was a story too incredible to believe, yet there was truth in his wide-eyed gaze. But then came the twist, hidden beneath layers of memory and revelation. As Tommy recounted his ordeal, he mentioned something peculiar. The leader of the pack had spoken to him, not in words exactly, but in thoughts, images, feelings. It told him of a place buried deep within the canyon, a sacred site known only to the coyotes and their ancestors, a place where humans rarely ventured, and where secrets lay dormant, waiting to be uncovered. John and Mary exchanged glances, both skeptical yet intrigued. Could such a place exist? And if it did, what did it mean for their son and for them? The answers remained buried, much like the canyon itself. For now, all that mattered was that Tommy was safe. As the family rode back to the ranch, the coyotes melted into the distance, their forms dissolving into the golden glow of the rising sun. The days that followed were a blur of emotion and activity. The entire community celebrated Tommy's safe return with a grand feast, complete with roasted meat, cornbread, and homemade apple pie. Laughter echoed through the night as neighbors gathered around a roaring bonfire, sharing stories of their own close calls and adventures in the wild. Yet beneath the joyous surface, an undercurrent of curiosity persisted. Whispers about the coyotes lingered, spreading like wildfire among the townsfolk. Some dismissed it as mere coincidence, while others believed there was something more profound at play, a connection between man and beast that defied explanation. Tommy, for his part, seemed different. Though he smiled and played with the other children during festivities, there was a quietness about him now, a contemplative gaze that often drifted toward the horizon where the canyon loomed. His parents noticed this change, but refrained from pressing him too hard, content simply to have him home. Still, they couldn't shake the feeling that their son had experienced something far beyond their understanding. One evening, after the last guest had departed and the embers of the fire reduced to ash, John sat on the porch of their ranch house, smoking his pipe and staring out into the darkness. Mary joined him, wrapping her shawl tighter around her shoulders against the cool desert breeze. For a long time, neither spoke, each lost in their thoughts. "Do you think he's telling the truth?" Mary finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. John exhaled slowly, the glow of his pipe flickering in the dim light. "About what? The coyotes? Or whatever else he said?" "Both," she replied, turning to look at him. "It sounds impossible, doesn't it? Animals protecting him, leading him back. And then that business about the place in the canyon." John nodded thoughtfully. "I don't know, Mary. But little did we know when we sent him out to play that day. This would happen. That boy went through something extraordinary. And yet," Mary added, her tone tinged with worry, He won't talk about it anymore. Since the night he came back, he hasn't mentioned it again, not even to us. John set his pipe down and leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Maybe it's because he can't. Or maybe he shouldn't. Mary frowned, unsure whether to agree or argue further. Before she could respond, the sound of soft footsteps approached from inside the house. Tommy appeared at the doorway, rubbing his eyes sleepily. He wore only his undershirt and pajama pants, his bare feet making no sound on the wooden planks of the porch. "Pa, Ma," he asked, his voice groggy but earnest. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course, son," John said, motioning for him to come closer. "What is it?" Tommy hesitated, glancing briefly toward the canyon before meeting their gazes. "Do you ever wonder why the Coyotes brought me back?" John exchanged another glance with Mary, who placed a comforting hand on Tommy's shoulder. "We've wondered plenty, Tommy," she admitted gently. "But we figured that's a question only you can answer." Tommy sighed, sitting down on the step beside them. "I tried to tell you before, but I didn't know how. It's hard to explain." He paused, collecting his thoughts. "When I was down there with the pack, I felt like they weren't just animals. They were watching over me, protecting me, like they knew exactly what to do." Mary frowned slightly. "And the leader? The one you said spoke to you?" Tommy nodded solemnly. "Yeah, it wasn't like talking, not really. More like pictures in my head. Feelings. It showed me things, places deep inside the canyon that I'd never seen before. And it told me, it told me that the canyon isn't just a place. It's alive. In a way, anyway." John rubbed his chin, processing this revelation. "Alive? You mean like a spirit or something?" "I don't know," Tommy admitted. "All I know is when I was there, I felt like I belonged, like I was supposed to be there. Even though I was scared, I wasn't alone. The Coyotes made sure of that." Mary listened intently, her heart swelling with pride and concern. She wanted to believe her son, to trust in the innocence of his words. But the idea of such a connection between humans and nature challenged everything she had been taught about the world. "But then," Tommy continued, his voice growing quieter, "when we got close to the edge of the canyon, the leader stopped showing me things. It looked at me one last time, and then it ran off with the rest of the pack. And I just knew that I had to go home." There was a long silence after Tommy finished speaking. The three of them sat together in the dark, the weight of his words settling heavily upon them. Finally, John broke the stillness. "You did the right thing, son," he said firmly. "No matter what happened down there, coming back to us was the best decision you could have made." Tommy smiled faintly, though his expression remained serious. "I know, Pa, but sometimes I wish I could go back, just to see if it was real." Mary pulled him into a tight embrace, kissing the top of his head. "Your place is here with us," she whispered. "That canyon may hold secrets, but our family holds something even greater. Love. And nothing will ever change that." Tommy nodded, accepting her words with maturity beyond his years. As he climbed back into bed, leaving his parents alone once more, John turned to Mary with a heavy sigh. "What do you think?" he asked. "Do you believe him?" Mary considered the question carefully before answering. I want to believe that there's still magic in this world, even in a place as harsh and unforgiving as the Wild West. If anyone deserves to experience it, it's our boy." John nodded, gazing out into the distance where the canyon stretched endlessly toward the horizon. "Until we understand what truly happened down there, all we can do is trust him and hope that whatever secret lies buried within those rocks stays hidden unless it chooses otherwise." Days turned into weeks, and life on the ranch resumed its usual rhythm. Crops were tended, cattle grazed, and chores filled the hours between sunrise and sunset. Yet despite appearances of normalcy, an unspoken tension hung in the air. Tommy continued to act as any child would, playing with his friends and exploring the surrounding land. But every so often, his mother would catch him staring wistfully toward the canyon, his mind clearly elsewhere. Then, one fateful afternoon, everything changed. Tommy had wandered farther than usual, drawn by the call of adventure that seemed to beckon him from beyond the fields. He found himself standing at the edge of the canyon once more, the familiar sight stirring memories both vivid and haunting. As he peered into the depths below, a sudden movement caught his eye. A lone figure emerged from the shadows, a human figure, dressed in tattered clothing and carrying a staff carved from driftwood. The stranger approached cautiously, his face obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. When he spoke, his voice carried the rasp of age and wisdom. "You've returned," he said simply, stopping several paces away from Tommy. Tommy blinked, startled. "Who are you? How do you know me?" The man tipped his hat back slightly, revealing piercing green eyes framed by weathered skin. "My name is Elias," he replied, "and I know you because you carry a gift few others possess, the ability to bridge worlds." Tommy frowned, confused. "Bridging worlds? What does that mean?" Elias gestured toward the canyon. "The Coyotes brought you here for a reason, boy. They chose you to uncover the truth about this place. But beware, they did not bring you back solely for your benefit. There's a balance to maintain, and should it tip too far in either direction, consequences will follow." Before Tommy could press for more answers, Elias turned and began walking away. "Think carefully about what you've been shown," he called over his shoulder. "For the time will come when you must choose which path to take." And with that, he vanished into the canyon, leaving Tommy alone with questions swirling in his mind. Back at the ranch, John and Mary grew increasingly concerned about their son's frequent trips near the canyon. Their fears reached a peak when Tommy failed to return home one evening, prompting another frantic search. This time, however, they discovered him seated at the very spot where he had first encountered the Coyotes, his face pale and his hands trembling. "Tommy!" Mary cried, rushing to his side. "Are you all right? What happened?" Tommy looked up at them, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and awe. "I saw him again, the man from the canyon. He said I have to make a choice." "A choice about what?" John demanded. Helping his son to his feet, Tommy hesitated, searching for the right words. About whether to stay here or go back to the canyon, forever. John and Mary exchanged stunned looks, the implications of Tommy's statement sinking in slowly. Until now, they had hoped the mystery of the canyon would remain unresolved. But faced with this new development, they realized they could no longer ignore the possibility that their son's destiny lay entwined with the secrets hidden within its depths. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the landscape in hues of gold and crimson, the Johnsons stood together, bound by love and uncertainty. Little did they know, the choices they made in the days ahead would alter not only their lives, but also the fragile harmony between humanity and the untamed wilderness of the Wild West. The night that followed was one of restless tension. John and Mary sat in the dimly lit kitchen, the lantern casting long shadows on the walls. The air between them was thick with unspoken fears and doubts. Tommy lay asleep in his bed, though neither parent believed he truly rested. His words echoed in their minds. Asterisk forever. Asterisk, what did it mean? Could they lose their son to a place so wild, so unknown? Mary broke the silence first, her voice trembling as she voiced her deepest fear. "John, what if we can't stop him from going back? What if this gift or curse, whatever it is, compels him?" John sighed heavily, running a hand through his graying hair. "We'll do everything we can, Mary. But little did we know when we welcomed him into this world that such a burden would fall upon him. But how can we compete with something so otherworldly?" Mary asked, her voice rising slightly. "How do we convince him to choose us over whatever calls him from that canyon?" John stood abruptly, pacing the small room. "We don't need to compete, Mary. We just need to remind him who he is, a boy with parents who love him, a home where he belongs. That should be enough." Yet deep down, John harbored the same doubts as his wife. The canyon had already proven itself capable of miracles, protecting their son, guiding him safely home. But at what cost? And now, with Elias's cryptic warnings lingering in their thoughts, the stakes fell higher than ever. Morning came too quickly, its golden light spilling through the cracks in the wooden shutters. Tommy awoke to find both of his parents waiting outside his door, their expression serious but gentle. He knew immediately that they wanted answers, and perhaps explanations he wasn't ready to give. "Tommy," John began, kneeling beside the boy's bed. "We need to talk about what you've been feeling, about the canyon." Tommy nodded slowly, pulling the quilt tighter around himself. "I know, Pama." He glanced between them, searching for understanding. "It's hard to explain. When I'm near the canyon, it feels like part of me comes alive, like there's something waiting for me there, something important." Mary reached out, taking his hand in hers. "And what about here, Tommy? With us? Doesn't your family make you feel the same way?" "It does," Tommy insisted, his voice cracking slightly. "But it's different. Here, I'm just Tommy, the kid who helps with chores and plays with friends. In the canyon, I feel special, needed." John exchanged a glance with Mary, seeing the pain reflected in her eyes. He placed a reassuring hand on Tommy's shoulder. "Son, being needed isn't always a good thing. Sometimes it means someone or something is trying to take advantage of you." Tommy shook his head vigorously. "No, Pa, it's not like that. The Coyotes, they didn't want anything from me except to help keep the canyon safe. And Elias, he said I have a choice. But I don't know what choosing means yet." Mary leaned forward, her voice soft but firm. "Then maybe it's time we help you figure that out. Together." That afternoon, the Johnsons decided to visit Old Man Peterson once more. Though reclusive by nature, Peterson had always been a source of wisdom for those willing to listen. His cabin sat nestled among the juniper trees, its roof patched with moss and its windows clouded with age. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney, signaling that he was indeed home. Peterson greeted them without surprise, as if expecting their arrival. "Come in," he rasped, gesturing toward the cluttered interior. Books and maps lined every available surface, while strange artifacts, feathers, stones, bones, were scattered across shelves and tables. Once settled, John wasted no time explaining their predicament. "Peterson, we think our boy might be caught up in something bigger than any of us understand. He talks about the canyon like it's alive, like it needs him for some reason. Do you know anything about this?" Peterson stroked his beard thoughtfully, his sharp eyes narrowing. "Ah, yes. The canyon has its own spirit. All right. Some call it guardian, others a curse. Depends on who you ask. But it doesn't choose lightly. If the boy feels drawn to it, then there's likely a purpose behind it." "A purpose?" Mary echoed, her voice tinged with desperation. "What kind of purpose could involve a child?" Peterson hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Long ago, before settlers came to these parts, the native tribes revered the canyon as a sacred place. They believed it held the balance between life and death, creation and destruction. Over time, that knowledge faded, buried beneath progress and greed. But occasionally, the canyon awakens again, seeking someone to restore it harmony. And Tommy is that someone?" John asked skeptically. Peterson shrugged. "Could be. Or maybe he's just curious, like most kids are. Either way, forcing him either direction won't solve anything. He must decide for himself." As they left Peterson's cabin, the weight of his words settled heavily upon them. Forcing Tommy to choose seemed cruel, but leaving him to wander alone into danger felt equally unbearable. Days passed in a haze of uncertainty. Tommy continued to visit the canyon's edge, though never venturing far beyond sight of the ranch. Each trip brought new insights, fragments of dreams and visions that puzzled even him. One evening, as dusk painted the sky in shades of purple and pink, Tommy spotted a familiar shape moving along the rim of the canyon, a lone coyote, watching him intently. The creature approached cautiously, its amber eyes gleaming in the fading light. Tommy knelt down, extending a hand tentatively. To his surprise, the coyote allowed him to stroke its fur, nuzzling against him affectionately. "You're back," Tommy whispered, his voice filled with wonder. "Why do you keep coming? Is it because of me?" The coyote tilted its head, letting out a soft whine before turning and trotting away. Tommy followed instinctively, his heart pounding with anticipation. This time, however, the path led not into the depths of the canyon, but instead to a hidden alcove tucked beneath an overhanging rock formation. Inside the alcove lay an ancient artifact, a stone carving depicting a wolf-like creature surrounded by symbols Tommy couldn't decipher. As he touched the carving, a vision flooded his mind. Images of storms raging across the canyon, rivers overflowing their banks, and creatures fleeing in terror. Then came another scene, a young boy standing atop the canyon's rim, arms outstretched as if embracing the chaos below. When the vision ended, Tommy stumbled backward, gasping for breath. The coyote remained nearby, its presence comforting yet insistent. It nudged him gently, urging him forward. Back at the ranch, John and Mary waited anxiously, their worry growing with each passing hour. Just as despair threatened to consume them, Tommy appeared on the horizon, his face flushed with excitement and exhaustion. "I saw it," he exclaimed, rushing into their embrace. "The canyon showed me why it chose me. There's a storm coming, a big one, and I think I can help stop it." His parents stared at him in disbelief, torn between pride and fear. Until now, they had hoped to shield him from such responsibility. But faced with his determination, they realized they could only support him. "Then let's prepare," John said resolutely. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together." As the stars emerged above the canyon, a quiet resolve settled over the Johnson family. Little did they know, the storm would test not only Tommy's courage, but also their faith in the bonds that tied them together. And amidst the chaos, a truth long buried would finally come to light, one that would change their lives forever. The days leading up to the storm were tense, filled with preparations both practical and spiritual. John and Mary worked tirelessly alongside Tommy, reinforcing the ranch's defenses against whatever forces might arise. Boards were nailed over windows, supplies were gathered, and horses were secured in the stables. Yet despite their efforts, a lingering unease clung to them, a feeling that mere physical preparation would not be enough. Tommy, for his part, spent hours meditating near the canyon's edge, seeking guidance from the mysterious presence that had chosen him. The coyotes continued to appear sporadically, watching silently as he communed with the stone carving hidden within the alcove. Each time he touched it, visions came, some clearer than others, but always carrying a message of balance and restoration. One evening, as the first whispers of wind stirred the sagebrush, Elias reappeared. He stood at the rim of the canyon, his figure silhouetted against the deepening twilight. Tommy approached cautiously, his heart pounding with anticipation. "Elias," he began, his voice steady but laced with urgency. "What I need to do? How can I stop the storm?" Elias regarded him solemnly, his green eyes reflecting the last rays of sunlight. "You cannot stop it entirely, boy. Storms are part of nature's cycle, just as they are part of the canyon's essence. Your task is not to prevent, but to guide, to ensure the storm does not overwhelm what must endure." "But how?" Tommy pressed, frustration creeping into his tone. "I don't know if I'm ready for this." Elias smiled faintly, a gesture both reassuring and enigmatic. Readiness is not something one achieves alone. It comes through trust in yourself, in those who care for you, and in the forces that have chosen you. Before Tommy could respond, Elias turned and vanished into the shadows of the canyon, leaving him once more with more questions and answers. That night, the winds grew stronger, whipping dust and debris across the open plains. Inside the ranch house, John and Mary huddled close to the fireplace, listening intently to the sounds outside. They had insisted Tommy stay indoors, though neither doubted he would soon venture out again. "Mary," John said quietly, breaking the silence, "we've done everything we can, but if the canyon truly calls him, we can't hold him back forever." Mary nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I know, John, and maybe that's not such a bad thing. If he believes he can help, then perhaps we should let him try." Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden gust of wind that rattled the shutters violently. Moments later, Tommy appeared in the doorway, dressed in warm clothing and clutching a lantern. "I have to go," he declared firmly, though his voice trembled slightly. "The storm is coming, and I think I know what I need to do." John rose to his feet, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "Are you sure about this, son? Once you step out there may be no turning back." Tommy looked up at him, determination shining in his eyes. "I'm sure, Pa. This isn't just about me. It's about all of us, about keeping the canyon safe, so it can keep us safe too." Mary embraced him tightly, her voice thick with emotion. "Be careful, Tommy. No matter what happens, remember that we love you and we believe in you." With a final nod, Tommy stepped outside, the lantern casting a feeble glow against the encroaching darkness. The world beyond the ranch seemed transformed, the air charged in almost electric tension. As he made his way toward the canyon, the ground beneath his feet vibrated faintly, a sign of things yet to come. By the time Tommy reached the rim, the storm had already begun. Thunder rolled across the sky, its echoes reverberating to the canyon like a heartbeat. Lightning illuminated the jagged cliffs, revealing their stark beauty even amidst the chaos. Rain fell in torrents, turning the dusty trails into slick mudslides. At the center of it all stood the stone carving, glowing faintly under the cover of the alcove. As Tommy approached, the Coyote pack emerged from the shadows, forming a protective circle around him. Their leader stepped forward, its amber eyes locking onto his with unmistakable intensity. "This is where it begins," Tommy whispered, reaching out to touch the carving once more. Instantly, another vision unfolded, this time showing him the source of the storm's fury, a buried fault line deep within the canyon's core, destabilized by years of neglect and human interference. Understanding dawned upon him slowly but surely. To restore balance, he needed to connect, not just with the carving, but with the very spirit of the canyon itself. Closing his eyes, he focused on the sensations coursing through him. The wind, the rain, the thunder, all elements united in a single, powerful force. And then he called out, not with words, but with thoughts, feelings, intentions. "I am here," he projected into the storm. Asterisk, I hear you. I see you. Let me help. Asterisk. For a moment, nothing changed. The storm raged on, relentless and unyielding. But then, ever so gradually, the wind softened, the rain eased, and the lightning faded. From somewhere deep within the canyon, a low rumble echoed, an acknowledgement, perhaps, or a sigh of relief. When Tommy opened his eyes, the scene before him had transformed. The skies cleared, revealing a sea of stars above, while the canyon below shimmered with ethereal light. The Coyotes watched silently, their mission complete. One by one, they melted into the darkness, leaving Tommy alone with the now peaceful landscape. Back at the ranch, John and Mary waited anxiously, their hearts heavy with worry. Just as despair threatened to consume them, the storm abruptly subsided, replaced by an eerie calm. Moments later, Tommy appeared on the horizon, his face weary but triumphant. "You did it!" Mary gasped, pulling him into a tight embrace. "Oh, Tommy, you really did it." John placed a proud hand on his son's shoulder. "Whatever happens next, son, we'll face it together. You're not alone in this." Tommy smiled faintly, his gaze drifting toward the canyon. "I know, Pa, and neither is the canyon. We're connected now, me, you, everyone, until the end of time, maybe." As the family stood together beneath the starlit sky, a profound peace settled over them, a peace born not of ignorance, but of understanding. Little did they know, the events of that night would become legend among the settlers of the Wild West, a tale of courage, sacrifice, an enduring bond between man and nature. And so, life returned to its usual rhythm, though forever changed. For Tommy, the canyon remained a place of wonder and mystery, a living entity that had claimed him as its own. And for John and Mary, their son's journey served as a reminder that sometimes the greatest gifts come wrapped in the most unexpected packages.